Tenemos el deber original, chapadero, a 10, a 10, a 10. Gabinete del diálogo chino, a 10 pesos para la protección de a 10, a 10. Todos los boletos se van 10 a 10. ¡Chéquele, chéquele! ¡A 10, a 10, a 10!
Sale 50, llévatelo.
China is everywhere in the world today. Its people, its products, its food and its culture surround us. But many are nervous about its rise. China has changed the world, but we know little about how it has changed from within. And I wonder, is there a reason to fear China? This is where my journey begins. I can smell the gunpowder. I hear them, but I can't understand what they say. There's chaos. And then, I see the light. Today, everything glows in China. Today, the Chinese shine. They celebrate China's rebirth to the world. A new social and economic revolution has risen. Long live the revolution. Does the government represent the people in China?
Actually, it's the same case of the United States.
I mean, communists are just like a rush of blood.
It's not a zero-sum game. They have to see that the pie can be shared.
It's problems between the two that seem to dominate much of the rhetoric.
They need to be on track in terms of accepting the rules and responsibilities that come with being a world power.
It is a complex relationship between the two countries.
The power over us is not restricted by anything.
China has a rich history. Its first dynasty, the Xia dynasty, dates back to 2000 BC. After almost 4,000 years, imperial rule ended in China. In 1912, the Qing dynasty was overthrown, and the Republic of China was created. A period of war followed, as military regimes ruled one after the other. In 1928, the Kuomintang struggled to establish a nationalist government amidst a civil war with the Chinese Communist Party. Then, in 1949, the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, proclaimed the People's Republic of China. My image of China was based on this period of history. But then I arrived in Beijing to find a bustling, modern city, an absolute clash with what I thought I would find. Soon enough, I'm invited to Peking University by a group of young Chinese students who run a debate club. Here are students with different backgrounds, but one thing in common: academic excellence. In order to be in Peking University, you have to be the best of the best. They are amongst the best in a population of 1.34 billion people. True competition can only be understood in China, and amongst this remarkable group of young people, I asked them, how is China seen today by the outside world?
When the Soviet Union collapsed, I think many in the West was looking at a TikTok situation, that when would it be the Chinese turn? And I think this is really something that happened in the West, and many people are still waiting. But the problem is many people have realized that China is not the Soviet Union, that China is developing if we look at Soviet Union before 91 and we look at China at this present stage, they're going in different paths, and we see that what was repeated in the Soviet Union may not actually happen in China. And I think this has surprised a lot of people, because we thought the Cold War would also mean the end of communism and socialism as well. And then suddenly we see China willing to break away from its past and adopt different new experiments that no one has ever tried in this world before.
Political change and the reforms will come as the economy grows, because once you are economically capable, the people will be actually have the ability to seek for legal aid or to seek for reform in the government.
I also feel that the Western world doesn't know us as we know them.
Whenever you speak to them and talk about China, they're still living in the days of red communism, Mao. They're still living in Mao Zedong era. They've not even seen the progression through Jiang Zemin into and all that the leaders have changed. Sometimes they don't even realize. And if you talk about China, they will always say about the same few things: Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen. But you see, that's the living image. They think that Chinese people they can't speak their mind. They don't have Facebook, and they can't Google. Their Google is limited, and that is the only thing that lives in their mind. But they don't see that the progress that has been made, and the fact that Cultural Revolution has already been declared a disaster by the Chinese education itself. In Beidao, we can talk about very sensitive issues, like June 4th, but in a private setting. As long as you don't talk about it in a political event, you can actually talk about it with your professors. They talk about it on their own.
Talk about it in class.
When the Nobel Peace Prize was given, everyone knew it on time. There was no time delay in China. We knew it was sensitive, but we were still able to talk about it freely. But I must say, Beidao might be an exception. Yeah, this might be an exception. If you go this way.
I too imagine Red China. There once was truth in this idea. From 1949 to 1976, the Chinese lived through a period of political fanaticism at the expense of economic growth. The Great Sparrow Campaign was launched as part of a public health campaign to eradicate the 4 pests. One of these pests was the sparrow, as the Communist Party claimed they robbed people by eating grain seeds. The effect of killing these birds was that locust populations grew out of control and devastated Chinese crops. In 1958, the Great Leap Forward prohibited private farming. It promoted agricultural communes. Local officers were pressured to increase grain production. Many reported more than they produced. Little was left for distribution amongst the local population. At the same time, labor was diverted to steel production. This resulted in a famine that killed up to 30 million people. The Cultural Revolution showed that nothing was more important than communism. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was evolving.
You are about to know the thrill of seeing that which has never been seen before. You are about to enter a beautiful, exciting, wonderful new world, the world of 1960.
I want to emphasize from the outset that I believe that we have far more critical issues in the 1960 campaign. The spread of communist influence,
In 1978, Deng Xiaoping steered China in a different direction with the open door policy. Its purpose was to modernize agriculture, industries, science and technology, and national defense. The open door policy marked the economic liberalization of China. In the south, 5 special economic zones were created with tax incentives to attract foreign capital and businesses. The Shenzhen Special Economic Zone was a pioneer in this experiment. Today, its high-tech industry is home to China's major manufacturing center, and China has become the world's second largest economy.
I think communist China has given up its communist ideal, so it's just a front for economic development. For Deng Xiaoping, his original idea is that economic liberalization is a form of socialism. So that is the discourse that is given, and so, but in reality, it's about capitalism and how people earn money.
China is in many aspects more capitalist than many capitalist countries these days. But if you go to more inland areas, you will still see that a lot of Chinese people are living at very poor living standards. And I think that this is a policy that Deng Xiaoping adopted himself, which is to allow a certain group of population to become wealthy, whilst the rest will wait. And I guess the problem now is how long are they waiting? Wealth distribution is a problem in China.
I think that China strayed from communism a long time ago to fully embrace capitalism. So despite the economic success, the party, I think it's still very vulnerable because of all a series of issues, primarily lack of democratic elections, of course censorship. It seems like a system full of contradictions, and probably what Deng said is very apt regarding this, like it doesn't matter if the cat is white or black, as long as he catches the mouse.
Why do you think then that the Western people, a lot of them, have this communist China idea?
Actually, first, they just put Soviet Union on China. That's totally different, and their perception of China is out of date. They just look at 1980s Cultural Revolution, everyone's crazy. And kind of communism is something really dangerous to democracy. But now China has changed a lot. Almost 40 years has passed. So if still foreigners do not learn new latest information about China, then they are totally kind of ignorant.
I think true blue communism no longer exists in China.
No, there's no communism in China. No, not at all.
And most of the Chinese students, they actually look down upon it, the concept of communism. They never take it seriously. They think there's something that is imposed on them, and they are forced to learn this. Then it makes them more, convinced that it is not a good thing. Because if we let we to freely choose what to learn, and if so many people choose to learn communism, it don't make you seem that make it seems like a good thing because so many people want to learn it. But once you impose something that most people don't like to learn, without this kind of coercion, without this kind of compulsory classes, we will think that without it, nobody will going to learn it.
The Chinese Communist Party has been in power for over 60 years. There is a structured and planned succession of leaders every 2 5-year periods. Political reform requires the consensus of many and the vested interests of countless. In 2013, Xi Jinping replaces Hu Jintao as President and Secretary General of the Politburo Standing Committee, effectively a 7-member inner circle from the party's most influential members. Xi Jinping will be the most powerful man in the world. He is also a princeling, or the son of one of China's revolutionary leaders, which is the closest thing to Chinese aristocracy. As such, Xi Jinping has political capital, but does he have the will to push for political reform?
I think they've been smart in the way they've approached it, because after the Cultural Revolution, I think they lost a lot of legitimacy in the eyes of the public, and they saw the best way to re-establish that and re-establish their power in the country was to pursue economic strength. And I think by doing so, they've kind of shown to the people that communism can work for the country and can work for them, the people.
Economically, we are going so fast, and our confidence have been accumulated, and the people's expectation of the political system, they want this kind of improvement of development in the political system becoming as fast as the economic system or economic growth.
Does the government represent the people in China?
Actually, it's the same case of the United States. The people, although in China there's no general election, but there are also representatives elected from the county, from the province, and those delegates or those representatives come together to Beijing each and every year on March. This is called National People's Congress, and they also bring people's voice to the central government. So it's the same of the United States. If you are asking the President Obama whether the government represents its people, then the answer will be the same, I think. So in China, government can represent people, but it do not represent all the people, because some people will do harm to others.
Also a misconception of many foreigners. I mean, China have a election law, okay, and China has very specific procedures how election should happen, and it's actually happening according to the law, which is not that democratic, but it's of course an improved version of what happened in before, PRC.
I think democracy that actually works everywhere. It is working in China.
I myself does not think multi-party system fit China. Let's be practical that we does not fit the 4-year or 5-year term and general election all over the China. No, we definitely want stability. And stability sometimes does not mean stability entails you have to sacrifice something, but China needs it.
This is Guangdong Province. It is the most populated province in China, with 104.3 million people. The population of this Chinese province is larger than the populations of Ireland, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, and Finland combined. The general argument is that China is too big to hold elections. Chinese citizens over 18 have the right to vote and be voted at the local level. But independent candidates don't stand a chance against the candidates of the Communist Party. The party advocates socialist democracy with Chinese characteristics. Is this a contradiction in terms? Do you think the Communist Party represents the Chinese people?
That's a question that only Chinese people can answer, I think. I don't think it represents it, but I don't think of it much as a problem, as I don't feel represented by my government.
I think democracy with Chinese characteristics, if you can look at it that way, is more or less that the government represents the people in making decisions and choosing the best way for these people to carry on. So there's not much understanding there's not much concept of elections or not much concept of having a diverse range of views, because I think it also goes back to the original traditional Chinese concept of maybe Confucianism, because what you have is somewhat like a philosopher king who knows the truth and understands what is best for the people, and he represents these people to do to do whatever he feels is best for them.
I think none of my friends have ever been invited to vote, for whatever government or whatever levels of government here. So that's not representatives. They don't represent us. I think the government for us is more like parents. The party doesn't represent the people. The party has never represented the people. We've been living under totalitarian governments for thousands of years. So for a lot of us, this is life. We just have to accept it. We never thought things could be otherwise. Some people are afraid of democracy. They think democracy is not for China. Yeah, Chinese people is they are used to obey. They are used to something. They are not used to this. So they think it's not for China. Yeah, the youth in China mostly think of that.
What do they teach you in school that democracy is?
Us is democracy. Yeah, our China is democracy. We have a special democracy. Yeah. You see democracy in Taiwan, which I suspect is working. But if you live in China, you see the news is all about I don't know whether they call them congressmen, the representatives. They all fight each other, they punch each other in the face. It's like theater. And you think, oh, we don't want that.
I mean, many people question that why Chinese people do not turn up against for a long time. I mean, against the communist government. So, I mean, my explanation is that if you read books, or read stories in the Chinese history, basically, Chinese people's the image of a good government is different from the Western one. I mean, so that's where I think when you ask whether China has a civilization clash with the Western one, I think this is an example. So in Chinese people's mind, most people, if a good government means that a government that keeps people alive instead of better people's life. So this kept happening in Chinese history. Chinese people only turn up against the government when their survival is endangered. So I'll tell you a story to illustrate that. So a friend of mine, when he took a taxi, when they heard the news reporting that the Egyptians and Tunisians are taking a revolution, so the reaction of the taxi driver was, why are they turning up against their government? I mean, their government is not letting them to die, is not starving them. Why are they doing so?
If someone's gonna use something to take advantage, to provoke people to fight against the government, that will cause instability. And people in China pay very much attention to stability and development.
In the West, we are all told that China is a place where you are not free. Yet, when I first arrived, I had a newfound sense of freedom. Freedom from fear. Coming from a city where insecurity is a concern, I felt safe in China. It was only later, when I tried to do what was commonplace at home, that I missed what I had taken for granted.
If I would go there and I would ask, I'm pretty sure that they would not tell me exactly what they think, maybe because they're afraid of the consequences.
How free do you feel?
Absolutely free. You can say what you want, but of course, for instance, if I'm in a meeting by the party members, by the comrades, there are certain things I will not say. The same way I would not say, let's say, certain things within, let's say, the American Congress or in the Senate, not because. But I think the main difference is that if I say it in China, definitely the repercussions are more serious because there are certain laws that are very loosely interpreted and not in my favor, and I could be, imprisoned fairly easily. In the United States, I can say wherever I want, but I won't be imprisoned. But the penalty that comes will just come in a different way. For instance, in the United States, most probably I will have the media lashing out against me. I would have parties lashing out against me. In China, I will have the police lashing out against me. So in that sense, yes, there is a difference.
You can talk about things privately. Most of the cases, fine. I can talk about a lot of things with my friends, with my family, and it's fine. I think I can do a lot of things. I feel it's really free.
They have an enormous amount of freedom in their day-to-day lives. You know, that's China's amazing authoritarian innovation, is this tremendous personal social freedom that most people in China have now, that is not the usual way that authoritarian countries behave.
And about the freedom of the speech, about some general free concepts that is very familiar to the Western people. I'm indifferent. Really, I'm indifferent.
I think, firstly, when you look back at what the Chinese government says, it is about freedom to live a good life and freedom to live well. So compared to China before the economic reform, citizens were both unfree politically and they were also not free economically because they could not have new opportunities and new options. China today, I think, provides citizens with a lot of options. It provides them a lot of opportunities to explore and to try new things.
I guess I need to define freedom first. That as you wish, we come here to the local neighborhood and we see this is not as glamorous as famous places or locations in Beijing. This is pretty local. I want to say that I'm not revealing something ugly in China. This is true, this is local. And this is the road that I have to go almost every week in order to buy something or go to supermarkets. So whenever I come to this road, I'm asking myself, is this a place I always want to stay for my whole life? Is this a place that I really love? I mean, I love the place I live in, but I'm seeking for change. I think I can achieve something based on my ability and based on what I've experienced. So freedom for me is that I don't have to go through this. I have my own options. I don't have to do this.
As a liberal citizen, I do not feel free. I mean, the main threat comes from the threatening of other people. I mean, but I mean, this is, I don't know how to say this. I mean, this is very tricky because, for example, if you speak something like anti-Semitics in the States, you also get punished or in certain kind of way, right? I mean, whether by media or anything like that, and you will be called as a racist also. But I don't know, but I do not feel like that people are respecting my liberal point of view.
Because, I mean, that would be comparing anti-Semitism to being against the party?
Right.
So are you free? No, of course I'm not free. For example, there's the freedom of speech. It is possible for me to say something and then I disappear from the face of Earth and nobody know what happened to me.
I mean, why do you understand that other people feel so free here? I mean, a lot of people I've spoken to, they tell me.
Yes, I'm okay. I don't know. Okay, this part you have to cut off because I will say something. Okay.
And then we just turn off the camera instead.
No, you can keep that, but I mean, it depends on how I develop in my later life.
This media censorship in China is brilliant, brilliantly done.
Censorship can include political and social issues, like environmental degradation. This is one of the bad pollution days in Beijing. The press calls it fog. The truth is not always clear in China. But technology has offered a gateway for public discussion. The Great Firewall of China is difficult to cross. It blocks social networks like Twitter and Facebook. But Chinese microblogs, or Weibo, have opened a crack through the wall. When a little girl was run over twice and ignored by 18 bystanders, Chinese netizens blogged about it in outrage. They questioned the lack of social values and worried about where Chinese society is headed. If microblogs are used by over 200 million people, is this a stepping stone towards freedom of speech in China?
What can you write about?
You can write about how the government is making progress. Basically, the kind of report that would make people feel good. It's feel-good journalism. Don't write anything to upset them or piss them off. Have kitties, puppies, bunnies, anything that would make you feel good. Pamper the people, and that's okay.
They're 100% censored in a very, very targeted way, right? So the Chinese government is by far the most advanced, sophisticated, authoritarian government in the history of the world when it comes to media control and censorship. And what they have innovated beyond what any other government has ever managed is to create an environment where, in a lot of ways, the conversation in the media appears normal and appears free. There's a million things that you can talk about, no problem. Social issues are often widely debated. So if you're the type of person who doesn't really care that much about politics, you might not even notice that there's anything weird about your media. It doesn't even come up. But when it comes to criticisms of the party, or it comes to any sort of sensitive topics that embarrass them, those are just surgically removed instantly.
Sometimes I feel like government is taking its people as idiots. Okay, it's like they think its people don't read external sources of news or whatever, and that's just really annoying, because we know what is going on there, and why are still hiding it from us?
People's attention on the internet has a very positive result recently. We can see there are many injustices happening in China, and the justice was defended through the pressure of the netizens in China.
Yeah, that is something that a lot of Westerners find odd, is that Chinese people are allowed to communicate on these things. There is a microblog in China. Oh, they do have something that's similar to Twitter. But I thought China was completely censored. I thought Chinese people weren't allowed to communicate or even get together in groups. There was a case called My Father is Li Gang case, where there was a university student in Hebei, a son of privilege, driving a sports car around his university campus, and he ran into a girl and killed her. But what came out and what was spread around on the microblogs was that he shouted, 我爸是李刚, which means my father is Li Gang, like don't do anything. His father was a local official. This became huge on the microblogs. It was passed around incredibly quickly, and it exposed this culture of corruption where you can get away with things if you know someone, if your family member is someone. But the fact that this went round on the microblogs does show that it wasn't censored. Maybe that was because the government didn't get a hold on it quickly enough. But it was passed around and everyone knew about it. The father ended up having to go on TV and apologize for his son, and ended up crying, and the son went to jail.
Chinese government want a evolutionary change instead of a revolutionary one. So But that's the problem. I mean, the evolutionary change is not keeping up with the worsening of people's life, especially of the lower class.
The start of the Arab Spring. Tunisians protest against corruption, their lack of political freedom, and high unemployment. The Western media calls it the Jasmine Revolution, alluding to Tunisia's national flower. At the same time, Jordanians pour into the streets. Yemenis cry for reform, and similar demands are shared in Libya. A wave of protests sparks in Egypt, demanding the resignation of Hosni Mubarak, who had been in power for 30 years. They achieved this.
Every other country in the world, the Middle East revolutions was front page news, day after day after day, week after week. It was the biggest story. Country after country is falling, everything's going crazy, right? Huge story. Not in China, right? In China, it's buried. Again, it's this subtle thing, right? They didn't like censor news about Egypt. That would be going too far, that would be over the top, and they're not that stupid. But instead of like having all of this all over the front page, stories about democratic revolutions and images of like 1 million people in a square with the army surrounding it, right? Very delicate-ish images. You don't want to remind Chinese people of anything else, and you don't want them to get any ideas. You know, they bury that stuff on page 10 and turn it from a giant story into a little one.
You would think that the Middle East uprising shows the party that the people can overthrow a government. But then again, I think both the party and the people know that China's situation is very different.
In China, citizens have the constitutional right to apply for permission to protest. The Beijing Public Security Bureau has the faculty to grant this permission, in theory. In February 2011, overseas Chinese dissidents used Twitter to call for a Jasmine Revolution in China. They were to do it shortly before the National People's Congress met in Beijing. The National People's Congress is China's parliament, with 3,000 delegates elected by China's provinces, autonomous regions, municipalities, and the armed forces. Just a couple of blocks away from where the highest authorities in China were meeting is Wanfujing Street, where activists wanted to make history. Security was increased. In the streets, there were more police than civilians. Curious bystanders wandered about. Cleaning trucks swept the main pedestrian street in order to prevent groups from gathering.
What it mainly was, from what I heard, it was a non-event. So there were calls for protests, but very few people turned up. In fact, many people come to Beijing to complain to the government, right? But usually these attempts are not successful. So the common response is that people just give up and they just choose not to do what they believe in.
Like, the people who don't want the party, they know they don't want the party, but they don't know what they do want. Because they haven't lived under a democracy. They don't know what it is like.
Yeah, we've been through a lot of miseries, and some leaders have really sacrificed their lives for us, and that's honorable. But at the same time, we see what's happening around you is like the authorities are just corrupted, and they don't give a shit about, they don't really care about people's lives. So how could you love them, you know, while you're hating them? It's just impossible.
The party wants every Chinese person to think, we are China, right? The government is China, the Communist Party is China, we're all China together. So if the New York Times writes a negative newspaper, or writes a negative article, or says something bad about the government, it's saying something bad about China.
People who want change, people who want to see change, people you would expect to go and protest, didn't go because they didn't think it was going to work.
Is fear at the bottom of the whole thing?
Fear, and it's also a sense of helplessness. It's like, so what if we went, you know? It probably won't help much.
There is a saying that you can't awake a person that pretends to sleep. Yeah. They know everything about the society, the dark side, but they prefer pretend to sleep. Yeah. I have more pressure than I expected from the school. And the classmates, they look at me as if I'm going to the jail or something. Really? Yeah. They ask me if I worry about to go to the prison. Yeah.
I don't know how far the government can go.
Yeah. I don't know either.
Jiang Fangzhou shared these thoughts with me. I never knew if she laughed innocently or nervously at the idea of going to prison. Through her blog and novels, she questions why the Chinese youth is afraid of politics. Her explanation is that they defend their government as if it were the legacy they are about to inherit. Far from being politically correct, her critical voice strikes a sensitive chord. Yet, as an icon of the generation of the 90s, she has far more liberties than others. Many in this film have worried their opinions might draw unnecessary attention to themselves or their families.
The power over us is not restricted by anything.
After months in China, I made the decision to interview a member of the Communist Party. I wanted to get the other side of the story. His name was Rao Chiking.
The understanding in China is that there's no alternative to the Communist Party.
Before the interview, I was petrified that he would ask me for a journalist visa I did not have. If he did, the best case would be the confiscation of my work. The worst? An indefinite stay in China.
1.3 billion people that don't have a voice. You think we're not scared?
It was before going into this room that I fully understood what risk meant.
Whoever is the first one to break any rules gets the axe.
Just like walking up these stairs, I then hoped the effort would be worth the journey.
You only have one life. Why risk it?
别国利益来发展中国，那么这个和平崛起的含义还应该包括中国即使崛起了。 发展起来了，也会努力地成为一个负责任的大国，为世界的和平稳定做出一个负责任大国应有的义务和职责。那我
Was that it?
应该是这个样子。
Far beyond my expectations, what I learned was that Rao Chiking was not just the face of the party, but a professor, a person with his own unique voice. But what surprised me the most was that I was free to ask questions. Is this becoming the norm in China, or was I merely lucky? I came to China without knowing if I could even do this documentary. No one really knows where to draw the line between what they can say and what they better not. In light of this uncertainty, people self-censor. I am at a crossroads in the story I want to tell, the story I was told. I ask myself if they will be safe after everything they've shared. But censoring myself would be censoring those who want to speak and be heard. This is the generation of the one-child policy. They push for change in their own way. And they are the future leaders of China. The Chinese have had many breaks in history and tradition. They have proven once and again that they are flexible and can adapt to the most radical changes. One of the biggest reforms was the one-child policy, established in 1979. An only child represents the pride or shame of the family, and embodies everything that grandparents and even parents could never aspire to achieve. Each person in the family plays a role in a machine that otherwise runs by itself. Currently, if a couple is composed of two people without siblings, they may have two children of their own. Still, there is now a generational gap that separates past from present.
From the first day to school, I think, one of our school slogan is 又红又专. It means royal to the party. So I think I was shocked, the first time I saw it in the wall. It's written 又红又专. I'm shocked. So from the first day, then I observed my classmates. Are they challenge the slogan? Are they obey it? Yeah, I think they believe that and they do as the slogan tells them.
Like my mother, who has two other sisters, both of them are party members. And they get better jobs actually. And after they retire, they get better pensions. And my mom was kind of the rebellious one when she was young, and she didn't join the party. So when she gets older, she sees how, the difference between her life and her sister's lives. So she told me, okay, you gotta join the party. Then you get better payment. But the other day, my mother and I, and also one of her sisters, were having lunch together, and my mother talked about me not joining the party thing, and her sister was like, why join the party? The party is the most corrupted. Don't do that.
Actually, my parents' generation and mine, they're totally different. China has developed so much, and in past, people do not live in very good condition. They consider something of eating and clothing, but we now are pursuing a kind of better life. And people go through Cultural Revolution, they receive education of Maoism, but we now receive education and acquire knowledge both from Chinese tradition and outside world. So we can get more information and we are more open-minded.
There is this big confusion amongst a lot of people about am I a slave to the West? Do I love the West? Do I hate my own country? So that makes a lot of Chinese people confused, especially young Chinese people who have been raised in a sort of more Western influenced culture in China.
I feel like when I'm learning this language, I'm not only learning the characters or the words, I'm actually learning the whole culture. Because now I can feel that some of my minds are more open, are different from my fellow peers, like the ones who don't master English that well. I can feel the change, and I feel sometimes even more comfortable about the Western values, like freedom, like democracy somehow.
The main difference between my generation and my parents' generation is that they had more choices in front of them when they decided how they should improve their lives. But the problem, so for example, with my generation is that we don't have much to choose. I mean, the situation, the system has been already established. People who can earn money has earned their money, and who can gain power has already had their power in hand. So basically, if your parents do not have either power or money, unless you are top students, especially you should. When I say top students, I really mean top students in China. Unless you're top students, you basically always belong to where your parents belong. From the same social class.
Family system is actually a mutual assistance system in China, because in China, in a long history, there's the absence of the insurance system. This kind of relationships serves as a mechanisms of providing mutual assistance financially, mentally, and from all other aspects. So maybe one child, like me, I have to support my father, my mother, and then I have to support maybe my grandfather, my grandmother, in both sides.
I think we, all the generation, generally speaking, we work very hard young generation, I think, they grew up during the change from the planned market to the free market. So they just rush money.
In August 2008, amidst rumors of a financial crisis, Beijing hosted the Olympic Games. China spent $43 billion for a 2-week sports event, double the combined cost of the Olympic Games in Athens and in Sydney. China is anxious to regain its status in the world and to be recognized as a powerhouse that it is.
Any more questions?
The Chinese are trying to understand the West better. About 300 million Chinese are learning English, compared to 40 million people who learn Mandarin.
Every rising power wants to be perceived as good, as friendly, as not an enemy of all over the world. We does not want to be antagonized. And I've seen some new developments that, like the first China promo has been released on the New York Times Square.
I wouldn't say it was particularly successful because there was a load of Chinese faces that no one really recognized and names that no one recognized, which in terms of like whether or not that's successful as a soft power initiative, it's probably not great because people don't like to see a load of faces that they don't recognize with the words Chinese money underneath it, because they think, who are these guys? You know, what are they? Are they going to be like? Are these guys going to be owning me soon?
I don't think you will ever have the kind of soft power that, let's say, the United States had, because I don't think you'll be able to win over a lot of Western nations. I don't think it has the common language and the common cultural background allows Westerners to say that China is one of us. So they always see China as like an uncertain dragon, or they see it as someone who is, they just do not understand China, and so with that there's a lot of suspicion and a lot of uncertainty.
Sometimes I feel the Westerners are looking at us with a pair of glasses, and they see the things they want to see, they neglect a lot of things they can't.
What do you think about this idea that China will be, the next superpower?
I think she's a different superpower as compared to America or the West that we saw, the British, the colonial empire, that kind of thing. They seem to be a more profit-oriented superpower. So long as there is room for them to develop their economy, so long as the Chinese people will benefit, so long the economy will grow, I think they will try and put their presence there. But they do not have what we call an ideological superiority. China does not seem to be one who thinks that socialism is the best policy and tries to spread that around the world. It's not something that they believe in, and that's different as compared to, let's say, the West, who believe they had a white man's burden.
Power comes from economic strength nowadays. I think when you look at America, I mean, they're going to be untouched militarily, but they're $16 trillion in debt, and 3 or 4 trillion of that is owed to China, which gives them huge control over the way America is run, whether the people realize it or not.
I think it's impossible for China to become a superpower in the 21st century. So this is a multilateral world, but not a superpower. And if China really wants to be a superpower, there should be some improvement in its political system, in its all other systems. So superpower is very ridiculous, I think.
Next superpower. Okay, to answer this question, you just go to the west part of China. Then you'll find, commonly people just visit Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. It's very big cities in China. But if you go to the west part, that's totally different scenario you will see.
I need people to know that stop be like, oh, China is growing so fast. It's not. It's like this little plant. It's a little plant, and then you put a brick on it. You put a heavy brick on the little bean sprout, and somehow, because this power of life, this bean sprout managed to grow a little bit. And then the world is like, oh my God, it grew 1 inch. But think about how much this plant can grow if you take this break off.
What can be expected for other countries if China takes a leading role in world politics?
What I can tell is that a authoritarian government cannot take the role as a global leader. That's totally, because they simply do not know what the responsibility of a good government means.
It's like one day you stay at home and you think that your country is the best country in the world, and then suddenly you see another whole country rising, and so it's natural for them to feel fear or that kind of feelings. So in this way, once they, and that's the point where they're starting to learn about China. And so if you start from that point, I guess you will kind of be biased from the starting point.
We're so used in the West to having this culture that is like a global passport. I mean, everyone knows about Western culture. It's the dominant global culture. And so that causes a lot of insecurity when we start thinking about, okay, well maybe we don't have this divine right to be the global dominant culture.
And I think that we do not take the time to actually study China and see China through its own eyes. We try to judge China based on our own ideas, on our own prejudices, on our own fixed concepts of what things should be like.
Why does the world fear China?
They simply do not know China. China has two. I mean, I'm not boasting here. I think China should always should stay humble, But China really has a very long history and very complicated, and they have a culture of their own. They are trying to interacting with the world, but many people, because China is just starting to rise from a communist system, many people still think that we still had this, old system, old mentality, which part of them we have, but it's a much longer historic. I mean, communists are just like a rush of blood. It adds very quickly. It adds off very quickly. Adds away very quickly. Instead, the culture that China really has stays on.
I think the world has a misconception of China. I think the world thinks that China is aggressive and out for other countries, but my impression of China is not that way at all. It's very peaceful, very nice people.
Where are you from, sir?
I'm from the USA.
Stability is quite important and peace is quite important. So from Chinese philosophy, China will rise peacefully and China will not make troubles to other countries because it also causes instability in China. In the past 1,000 years history, China has experienced so much wars. Chinese people now are crying for peace.
而且现在全球化日益发展，各国之间的联系也非常的密切。我觉得通过大家彼此的了解或者是交流，大家可以对中国的态度会有所改变。
I buy something in the store and I see made in China, I'm not very happy about that because I would buy things made in the USA.
What the world think about China without coming to China? That's your question, right? Chinese people are really evil. They are going to flood up our market with cheap stuff, and we broke down. The company will go to bankruptcy, and the whole country will be a crap. Well, that's something a really extreme vision of what can happen, that I don't think will happen.
How do you think the West sees China?
I think it's a love-hate relationship. I think they love them because in my moment of economic crisis, we see the credit crunch. China bought my bonds, So in a way, it's a rescue attempt. But I think it's also a very much, it's a hate relationship as well, because we get a lot of made in China goods flowing to the United States. We get a lot of Chinese brain, which I think is the part that hurts the most. It's not so much the products, it's the brains, the Chinese brains that's flowing to their markets. And the threat is, I believe, overwhelming for them. But I think the West needs to understand that there are certain things about them, there's certain assets that they have that the Chinese would maybe never learn, or will take at least a few hundred years to develop. And the rule of law is one of those huge gifts that the West has for the East, and they shouldn't feel that paranoid, because gone are the days when we have to live in a Cold War and we're always in a competitive mode. It's not a zero-sum game. They have to see that the pie can be shared.
We change, but we change evolutionarily and in a different way, perhaps. And I think people should give China more time and to see what's happening.
We know there is history. We know there is some sort of kind of discrimination. We know they have different ideas with us, but we think the most important thing, I think most of the Chinese people, especially students, think that we have to succeed in something and to prove that we are as good at them, or we are doing something that is okay, and I think it's not kind of a threat to others, or we are doing something that just like others, common people, we just want to have a better life.
Why did you accept to do the interview?
Accept the interview? I found myself had something to say. That when the professor told me that the lady actually want uncensored, want something aside from what we can generally see from newspapers, media, both Western and Chinese. And I found, wow, I do have my thoughts, and I want to share with the lady. It may be personal, it may be political, it may be something sensitive. But I like to say that's how I think. And I may not be that fully representative, but I guess I can represent a group of people here, students, youth.
Thank you. In the past, people who have failed to embrace change have been left behind. The Chinese have had to adapt to drastic changes in their history, going from a feudal system to a communist one, before leaping into capitalism. They have struggled to get where they are. China is on a bullet train towards a destination unknown. Like other countries, this giant has internal problems to solve. It has to rescue 180 million people out of poverty, face increasing social inequality, solve internal ethnic divides. And as the economy continues growing, the party might have to respond to greater demands for freedom. Until now, China's astonishing economic growth has overshadowed the cracks in their one-party political system. The West hopes that economic development will lead to political change. But China is unique. Democracy has not come with capitalism. Democracy is no longer a Western concept. China has a complex system of governance. The West is still waiting for the Chinese Communist Party to fall, but the party's color has faded in order to survive. Communist ideology has walked out on China. Its socialism is plagued with capitalist dreams. So do we fear China for its communist past or for its capitalist future? And who fears who? Suspicion goes both ways. In China, a Western model challenges the party's grip over the masses, whilst the West has been taken aback by the incredible success story that is China, forcing Westerners to challenge indoctrinated notions of superiority. In the end, we have more to fear from an unstable China than from a rising China. China is diverse. Its people are diverse. And it changes at its own pace. China has opened up to the world. They opened up to me, and we share this with you. Understanding each other might just be the key to preparing for the future. And today, There is no future without China. We must give China time to show us its new face, and we must take the time to know them. Today, I feel I truly see China. Today, I have hope. Hope in a nation none of us should fear.